just wanted to document a couple of things. I was looking through a list of the 2 deleted videos that I watched before I deleted them for the topics that were in them, so that I could just go over them again. One of them was important, really, because it just shows how strange things can be, which was the night of my bad mood in a ketos on dieta 4, I think, or 3, in the hotel anyway. When Arturo came back and blew Mapacho over me, I forgot to mention that he'd also had a really strange experience. He took the old guy to a restaurant, the blind guy, partially blind guy, and made sure he had some food, but it was the ice cream place on the corner near where we were filming that shot, which Bianca will know as well, because we went in there the night I did my usual OCD of trying to help damaged or trapped insects, especially butterflies, and put them back out. And I picked this bug up off the floor and put it on the table, and all the locals thought I was fucking crazy. So that was quite amusing. But anyway, Arturo and the old guy were sat in there, and Arturo was facing the road, and of course there's no window, so you're just facing out through the gap, so he could see, and people were walking by on the pavement. And he said this strange character stopped and was just looking at him, and then started making really weird vocalizations and hand gestures at Arturo. And then Arturo, obviously, because he's on his 7th dieta, so he's very, very open. And this guy was really strange, and at one point he was just being really kind of making strange faces and aggressive, kind of weird, just shit, just only at Arturo, not at everybody else. And then at one point he went like that to Arturo. So, you know, you can make of that what you will, and you know, I'm the same. But Arturo, it disturbed him quite a bit, because he said it was just fucking weird. You know, what the fuck was this guy? I'd never seen him before, and he just appears outside the cafe when I've just done a good deed, and he's giving all that shit. After obviously Arturo and Damien have already experienced a shamanic war with the dark shaman in Pucallpa, who was trying to stop them building a Maloka there, which I think I've said about in other videos, which is I got mixed feelings about it in some ways, because the Shipibo back in Pucallpa, which is where they're from, are obviously trying to protect their own livelihood as well. They don't want shamans popping up all over the place and effectively taking their work away. Even if they only work for the locals, it's still an income. Which brings me on to, I think I have mentioned this before, about the incentive for dark shamanism, which Arturo has told me that, you know, you can start to become a dark shaman within about 3 months, because you don't have to do the same level of dietas that you do as a normal person trying to be a healer, because you have to be cleansed yourself first. You have to be spiritually clean as possible before you can have access to the Icaros from the plant spirits. So it makes sense that people like the Star Wars thing. It's easier. It's an easier path, but because you can read books on black magic and stuff, or just read information on it without having to go through the same level of purification. So you can actually start practicing. And of course, the main incentive for that is for money, probably in many cases as well, because these dark shamans can charge money for people who want to, say, you know, put a hex on their girlfriend or whatever it might be. You know, I think I've said it before, you know, or maybe in the video that's uploading either before or after it got cut off, which is on negative thought trains, which I'll have to probably do an addendum for that again when I watch it again, because that got cut off because of the memory on the phone again. But anyway, going back to the dark shamanism, that's the incentive, is for many of them, just as a simple incentive, let alone if they're naturally horrible or evil people anyway, and you know, want to do somebody harm and just for the sake of money. But what Damien apparently told Arturo, Arturo asked about what happens to bad people when they die, and Arturo's view is that disembodied spirits just circle the earth, whatever that means. So I take that in a way that they are lost. They don't get to cross over to the other side, back to join the rest of supreme consciousness, if you like. which is all just basically full of feelings of love. Those biblical explanations are pretty much the same in that, i.e. going to heaven. So it seems that they have to spend a particular amount of time, until when or what happens, I don't know at this stage, in some form of purgatory. But bear in mind, time doesn't have the same meaning. Time doesn't exist in these dimensions because it's not linear. So we can't relate to that in this sphere of existence anyway. So it's kind of a bit weird, but thinking about me and Mike when we were back in Cornwall at Jesslothan Church and moving the ghost of Tryphena Pendavis, maybe if someone's on the other side and they are lost, which Maestro reckons that can happen in two ways. Either someone's a bad person, so they're stuck because that's their punishment, their purgatory, or just by because choice and chance still exist. Otherwise everything would be predestiny, which is a ridiculous philosophy, because there'd be no point in anything because everything's planned, and what would be the fucking point? No matter what you did, it's already planned. So it's just, I don't know why people even bother with the idea of predestiny. There can be pathways that are preferentially chosen or influenced, it seems, on that regarding the quantum thought trains, because you have a choice, and therefore consciousness has a choice. So there may be a direction, which is why people find themselves on a spiritual path, because they're being kind of pushed in that direction to help them. And if that comes off, then they're on the path. That's just an example. So, but it's obviously it's difficult stuff to really get your head around if you really want to get into it, because you'll never know the true answer anyway, except where you find yourself, like I am. I mean, 5 months ago, I would have thought, I thought I was just coming here to do ayahuasca to get healed, and now I'm seriously thinking that, especially stuck back in Iquitos, that I don't have another. It's just, what else am I going to do now? I'm not going to meet anybody here apart from people like a nice German guy that I met, had a 2-hour conversation with a nice guy last night, just to help people and give them full knowledge within a couple of hours of what I've learned about ayahuasca, and put them straight on what the reality of it is, especially as far as the magic goes, because most people's perception is, it's just a drink, and it's, even if they've done research, it's the medicine that does the work. No, it's not. It's the shamans that do the work, and it's the plant spirits that do the work, and it's the magic that does the work, and it's the shamans that control that, and that's end of story. That is the known situation. That's inarguable. And this becomes part of a circular argument like we had with me and Bianca when we were first wrestling with the whole idea of was it all a delusion? And of course you can go down all these avenues of, what did we see? Was it really demons, when you're not on ayahuasca? But we know what we saw, we know what we experienced, and it kept coming back to that point. And we went through this so many times, and it just becomes this circular argument, and back to the square one where you started, that you cannot deny. So you cannot be on the fence. If it happened, it's real, in which case everything else is real. You can't have it both ways. You can't have half rationalization and half spirituality. It's all or nothing. So, but it takes time for you to reprocess this, because you're also breaking aspects of your Western conditioning that wants to just say, there's a scientific explanation, it's a psychological explanation, it's a powerful hallucinogenic. Well, yes, the hallucinogenic side is true, but that's not what it's about. And the proof always in this circular argument comes back to the proof of shamanism and the magic and the healing, because you cannot escape the fact that you get healed. So it doesn't matter all the medical scientific arguments to say how that can happen, because they can't do it. They can't rebuild your body from the cell up, except with stem cells, but that's a completely different area of science, and it's only got limited application anyway. So 9 minutes already, shit. So but anyway, these are the sort of the thought trains you go through. So also leading on from that to the whole aspect of energy, because thinking about this, and Mike wrote to me about diet and stuff, and how important realizing how corrupt the food chain is, which it is, because you can't get food that hasn't got preservatives, salt, sugar. Even now, I just can't get it. You have to have some stuff, else you can't eat. I mean, you can boil your veg and have your main meal. It's pretty much dieta, but you can't do completely everything free And it doesn't matter in my stage, but later on it probably will. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was the Bobinsana Icaro when I first had my first dieta Icaro, which was, strangely enough, Arturo explained, has a request for money and happiness. Now, you think, well, why money? Especially most people think, well, in my case, I've got a load of money from the house, but it's not about that. It seems to be a request to bring you health and happiness that money in this world can buy, provided you're aware of what you can do with it, what you should be doing with it. Because it's not about you for just material gain, it's about what you could do with it. That's the way I see it, which is why, for me to be a multi-millionaire now would just be amazing, because it would all be used for really big projects, malokas and training shamans and stuff to get the numbers up. That's because I see it as a numbers game, to rebalance, to redress the imbalance of light and dark. What the fuck do I want a Porsche for, or a Ferrari, or a fucking great big mansion? You're just sucked back into that whole world of what I've just spent a load of money trying to escape from, and everyone else is now trapped in. And the longer that goes on, I fear that they're not going to be able to get away. But certainly not without 2 jabs or a good reason to travel or something like that, So, but we'll just have to see how that pans out. And now I'm starting to feel a bit more harshly about it, that if, you're either part of that system of continuing that level of darkness by being in it. I know most people just can't walk away from that. They're not in my position with their families or commitments. It's not. But unfortunately, you do have to see it, that if you're still in that, suffering as you may well be, you're still part of the problem, because you're in it and you're continuing its functionality, because you're a prisoner within it. I don't want to make anybody feel bad about that, but I just thought I'd mention it just so that you realise my view on it, which is why I'm thinking even more so now that I'm going to have to do the shaman path, because it keeps me in the jungle for a long period of time. I'm getting more versed in living in that environment and staying away from the jab scenario, and also remaining sort of hidden, occultado, from the authorities as long as possible. I'll only have to jump the border maybe in 4 months or whenever my 183 days are up, and then just go and hopefully by then my Spanish will be better and I'll be able to talk to see how we can, just whether it's just a question of hopping the border for 24 hours to Ecuador or Colombia or wherever, Bolivia or wherever it is, whatever's on the doorstep here. Brazil, even if the borders are open there, just to hop across and come back in. But anyway, so what else was on the list? Fear removal. This is a big part of ayahuasca, because it's about ego destruction and humility, which is why people who don't have sufficient ego destruction struggle in ayahuasca ceremonies, because they're not humble enough, and therefore their fear is still really too strong to let them consciously relax. Your subconscious fears are going to still be there, because that's how it works. You have fear like you will never experience ever in your whole life, in a way that you can't even imagine, as I've said before, in so many ways, because it combines all aspects of your being, which is spiritual, emotional, physical, and psychological. So the fear aspect is part of the trauma removal, because all of your trauma is based on fear. It's our strongest emotion as creatures to stay alive. And of course it has many facets to it, from just everything, love and just fear of losing your life. So one aspect of fear removal that's great is in normal day-to-day life you don't have, well, I don't have a fear of death. Fear of dying because it's unpleasant, but not, and even then it's not fear, it's just whatever could happen. You can't do anything about it anyway. But fear of dying is removed, and I really wanted that before I came, because that's a natural thing for anybody to have a fear of dying, because our ego constructs that model for us so that we stay alive. So that's great. It's just like the trauma, it's another aspect of having a whole aspect of mental clouded perception removed. And of course it also affects later ayahuasca ceremonies, because once you get to a point of particular, say 70% of your cleansing is removed, or say all of your traumas and your problems, say 70% is removed after a stint at somewhere like the temple, which is really rigorous and harsh. It only leaves mopping up really after, and that's just a question of continually doing more ceremonies, which again is another misconception. And I think that's part of the business model for those who have done ayahuasca and spent a lot of money, and then it's like they tell them, you just go away and, the ayahuasca keeps working. Well, I'm sure it does to a degree, but not like that. Me and Arturo have had this discussion. We think after a couple of days it's pretty much done. As far as bulk healing goes and removal of general spiritual shit in physical form, whether it's spot or just treatment of other courses like my eczema now is just gone. I haven't got any today. So that appears to have actually gone. So it's just unbelievable, what the healing that can be done. And this also means that future ceremonies are a lot easier, especially if they're done in the way Damien does them, which are really gentle, because there's no need to, you don't need to vomit anymore. You might have some strange, like for me, I've still got stuff in my stomach, I know that. But compared to what it was, it's nothing, but it still might just be, I actually actively ask ayahuasca to find what's left. As soon as I drink it, it's like, off you go, thanks, go down there as deep as you can and find all the remaining shit and let's deal with it and get it gone. So fear or anxiety or nervousness before ayahuasca ceremonies doesn't affect me either anymore. It's just another day at the office. I've done 14 now. And the last few, once I started the dieta, I think probably the first or second night I still had, because you never know what's going to happen. But thinking, what could happen? But after the first one or two, and they were so gentle that you don't have fear anymore. You just want to go back there because it's such a nice space to be in, and that's your highlight, especially when you're in the jungle. It's your highlight of your week anyway, is to do the 2 ceremonies a week. So when they arrive, and it's like, at least the ceremony day, at least I've got a ceremony tonight to look forward to. Yeah, even if it's only short, like a couple of hours, they're not long, especially when it's just me. They don't have to be there. Like a couple of Icaros long, maybe a third one if for a communication with Arturo or someone else or whatever. So 2 or 3, and then, he does it so that you get enough, if the stuff's still in you, enough discomfort so that you get relief from it, but still feel a bit kind of nicely spaced, and you're just happy to go and lie in your bed, and if you have your thought processes, and then have a nice sleep after. So for you, Bianca, it's still, you always mention, oh my God, the spiritual thing and fear. What you have to understand is that when you've done enough ayahuasca ceremonies, the fear is removed. So it's not a problem anyway. But you have to just do enough to get to the point where you don't have fear anymore. And this is why the shamans, if you think about it, can do what they do. Because they're completely cleansed people. They're still human during the day, and yes, they still have low moods and they get tired, of course they do. But not to the same degree, because they're at a different level of being able to handle these things. So that's what I meant in the last video about how it should get easier in some ways, although the actual being on the diets for the period you're on them is still more difficult from being spiritually open and what you might be exposed to in terms of stronger dark energies being attracted to you and make you suffer of things like physical pain that can be strange. My first night in my dieta, when I went to try and sleep in the hammock that night, I had this terrible pain in my eyeball twice that I couldn't even explain. It was really horrible, not even like a migraine. It was a really bad pain right in the center of my eyeball that lasted sort of 5 or 10 minutes, and it was like, fuck, this is agony. What the fuck is this? And then it went, and then it came back again, but it's never happened since. So it's like this strange... I'm hoping that's related to migraines, actually, because I haven't had one since. But it's only been a couple of weeks, but we'll see. There's always... Because everything's related, whatever, there's so many problems that feed off your main ones from anxiety. They cause so many other physical and issues and stress and tension in your body and all of this stuff. And finally, just the dark energy thing. Thinking about that haunted house analogy just earlier on when I was having a pipe, it's really interesting to me that these dark energies I was wondering why they would go to place where humans have been rather than places where humans are. If they need to feed off white energy in principle. I think like when you have a house with a family scenario, there's too many people in there that make it uncomfortable for the dark spirit to actually be there, especially if they're non-believers or they just don't feel them. There's no way that they can feed. But so I suppose like some other being, like a wild animal, they still like to have their own den, if you like, where, so, obviously, Damien's place out in the sticks there, there's nobody there. And it's down, it's by the water, and Santo was of the view that it was a dark water spirit. And of course there are different spirits, if you want to look at it like that. Certainly in terms of life force energy, I do now. But as far as the analogy goes of why they want to go into an empty house, it started to make me think about why possession can occur. It's like if a human being is so damaged over time or with psychological issues and stress, they've had so much of their own normal spirituality, spiritual energy extracted from them that they effectively become an empty house, which makes it easier for darker forms of energy that can become demons in the classic sense, that can actually really affect their psychology and their behavior, to actually move in. So that was just an interesting thought I had this morning about seeing a human who's debilitated to such a degree that they become effectively almost an empty house, that this thing can not just use at its den but still has a food source in terms of light energy to feed off. So I just thought I'd mention that because it was an interesting thought train, because obviously Bianca had come to this conclusion, which I may have mentioned before in other videos, with her psychology when we were thinking about Jack, and had a lot of discussions when we were travelling about what happened at Capitari. Like I said, we went round the circular argument so many times because Bianca was on the fence. I'm sure she won't mind me saying so. Whether she still is or not, I don't know. I don't think so in many ways, but she still has the fear, don't you, Bianca? You still really fear these things instead of seeing them for what they are, when there's no need. There is no need, because they're ego constructs. The dark forces exist, but there's no reason to fear them, because you know what they are. I've explained it to you and how I dealt with them, although I didn't know what I was doing at the time. It was just a basic willpower, kind of with good intention, to protect Bianca in those ceremonies that we had, with a preparation to sacrifice myself. I don't know why I felt like that. The ayahuasca thing, it's just weird. I don't know where I found that strength from, because I've been more afraid since. I have been afraid, very afraid, especially in the temple, because you're exposed to so many other things. That's why I said, that made Capitari's demons seem like children's toys. But they're different. They're kind of different levels of energy, maybe different dimensions as well, like the Blue Goddess or Satan himself. But anyway, so yeah, the whole thing about dark energy, I just literally see it in terms of that. If it's a driving force of your life and you can't live without it because you will die, if it's extracted, as I said about how shamans can kill, by removing 100% of somebody's spiritual energy, they can kill them. So there's your answer. So that's why my insight or my description, however it was given to me before the temple, in Capitari actually. I think it cropped up in Capitari because we were discussing it by the shower block, why I had that kind of insight as to view them as like an infestation or an infection. And of course, because there are multiple different types of energy, and therefore creatures, if you want to look at them like that, they're not like the same bacteria of the same type. They're different types, and they've different sizes and different strengths. And this is why you can have multiple different ones like Jack did, where you can have, say, 4 smaller ones and one really big one. And again, this comes back to the analogy of the haunted house, or the empty human house, because we suspected Jack had dabbled in black magic, possibly something to do with Red Indians, because he mentioned it in a sharing circle about these songs that he thought had Red Indian origins and whatever. And the song he kept singing is, I can sing it now. It doesn't bother me. It's just like, I've made a big deal of it before, but it's like a doorbell thing, Again, this is about that whole thing, removal of fear. Bianca's probably going, oh no, don't sing that song ever again, fuck. And I said at the time, I'll never sing that song again in my life, but now it's just fucking nonsense, Not nonsense, but you know what I mean. Nonsense to me now, because it's so minimal in the sphere of my experiences that it's nothing. But this whole aspect of the human body becoming an empty house, if someone's psychologically damaged enough, or if they've already gone through enough physical and mental and emotional trauma, as I had, where you've had so much of your spiritual energy already removed. Because the reason I say that is because I had an experience after the first week on my dieta, where Bibi had cooked some food. Oh, and Mike, get some plantains, plantaino, and boil them. That's how you cook them. They go bright yellow, orange, and they're really sweet, and they're really good for you, because part of that diet is designed, the diet is designed to stay in you as long as possible, meal to meal, so you don't go for a shit for about 4 days, because it stays in there to give you maximum nutrition from the food that you've got, as well as to suck out as much negative shit in the whole of your intestines. So it's a really slow process as it goes through. But anyway, so yeah, plantains are really good for you. And of course, if you're on any sort of salt-free diet with nothing of any taste, then at least the plantains, when they're boiled, they're really sweet. After you boil them, you can boil them in the skin or take them out of the skin. It doesn't matter. But it's just easier to peel them first if it's an easy peelable one, and just do a couple of those, and they're really good, and really good for you. So they're key to the diet. So that's something. And so yeah, this whole thing about losing spiritual energy was, I bought some ginger, and I had a big piece of ginger in my meal, and when I ate it, and for the first time since I've been here, I actually sweated really quite profusely, which is unusual for me. And then it made me wonder why that was the case. I'm in 30 plus degrees. Why shouldn't I be sweating buckets? Because it's not normal, The last time I remember sweating like that was in Brazil on a really hot day. And then I wondered about how much the draining of spiritual energy makes you cold, which is why I hate the cold, because I can't stand it. I'm already internally cold because I don't have the spiritual energy to drive my processes as fully as I should, which is why people who, like me, used to get really tired and have to sleep so much, and you don't want to get out of bed, and you certainly don't want to live in a cold country, and you really feel the cold. So I was wondering if that was connected as well. And maybe because of being on the plant diet for a week, and then that spiritual energy was starting to return. I was open on the diet, I was getting back some spiritual energy that should have been there, enabling my body to start functioning properly and actually start to sweat properly, which is also a form of purging, because obviously you're taking toxins out of your blood. And part of my diet is also, part of the fresh water and the whole diet is a blood purification process anyway, which was key in my case. I think probably related to damage that's gone back to chemotherapy in the 90s from having cancer. So, the whole removal of toxins from your body in terms of spiritual energy, because if the cells are damaged and they haven't got enough, they're damaged because they're not functioning properly because of lack of spiritual energy. So I really think it all comes back down to this, and this is part of the whole control grid structure that keeps everybody trapped in it, and you're just basically being used as hosts for these dark energies, which, as we know, is prevalent in the world at the moment, a little bit too powerful. Which is why it has to be redressed. It will come, because everything goes in cycles anyway. It's all about a yin and yang cycle, and like people like Sean, who had mentioned this years ago, who are really into their sort of mysticism and their horoscopes. This is the darkest age of man out of the cycles of light and dark, which was the end of the age of Pisces, if you want to see it like that. And we've hit the bottom of the trough, and we're starting to come out into the age of Aquarius. Now that's all horoscope stuff. I don't know anything about it apart from that, but it kind of makes sense. Where we would have maybe get back to a golden age, which was supposed to have been like the civilizations of Atlantis and things like that, if you want to get kind of esoteric and mystical about it. But I believe that civilization exists, or something similar that was named that or thought of that because of previous civilizations on the planet that could map the Earth. If you do that research with like Graham Hancock and books like that. But anyway, that's a different subject. So I've ended up, as usual, talking more than I intended. So it's half an hour long now, but at least it won't be so big. But I just thought there was a few interesting things. I wanted to get that thing with Arturo done because that was strange, and it kind of rattled him as well when he came back to the hotel that night, you know. And that's why we sort of had a chat for a while and blew so much mapacho over each other, ourselves, and he blew the agua florida over me. And doused himself in it after his encounter with whoever that guy was who gave him the... Again, but it's, you know, these can just be dark spirits that are in somebody that's under a control of a shaman that's just sent, because all they can do is frighten you. It's all about... This is what I tried to say to Bianca. It's all about all sort of demonic kind of energies. They can only live or affect people through fear. They have to try and get your attention and then get you afraid of them, and then they have a grip on you. So if you don't have any fear of them, then they can't harm you. And of course the fear is a construct of the ego, and that's why the ego is massively destroyed, or certainly massively diminished as part of the ayahuasca process, because it's the house of fear is the ego. So it has to be diminished, and it's very difficult. It's easier the older you are, because you've already been through so many things and you're already approaching the end of your life, so you kind of, this part of the life pattern is to come to terms with death when you're older anyway. And of course I had to already have a philosophy of life and death when I went through cancer in my 30s, because, you know, if things had gone wrong, that was going to be fucking game over, you know. So maybe that's why I'm a bit ahead of the curve in that sense. Maybe which is why I don't have any fear, or didn't have any fear in the first ceremonies of Kapatari when I was on the spiritual plane, and they were strong. I mean, fuck, our first 3 ceremonies were fucking super strong. Only the third one had visuals, but actually the second one was really strong. I think the first one I had visuals, but not so much. But the second one I certainly did, and that's when I went to the realm of the ancestors, which also makes me think of these in terms of different planes of existence. From when I was talking about Maestro the other night, in my last ceremony, saying he visited his ancestors and linked with Arturo and his own Maestro, Hierro, I think his name is. Because that plane, I can relate to it, because I think I went somewhere similar where in my account I went to that plane of like African ancestors and Red Indian ancestors, with the guys all very shadowy kind of shapes, but with spears, and you could make out clothing. And I was really sick in their world, so that kind of resonates with me. So, but how it works overall, I have no idea. You know, whether these... In some ways, I think it's different levels of energy, because the higher up the spiritual ladder you're supposed to go, the higher the energy vibrations are, which is what enlightenment's supposed to be about. You know, the higher energies are love, and the lower frequency spiritual energies are sort of like your darkness and your demons. But hey, you know, look on YouTube. I don't know. That's just what a few people have mentioned to me. So, right, 4 minutes long. That'll do. So. I'm just cracking on with just doing my Spanish dictionary stuff, and tomorrow it's raining. It's been raining the last couple of days, so we kind of almost have a dark period as well here, so I'm in sympathy with all of you people in Europe that are going through the clock change and facing seasonal affective disorder. Well, you know, good luck with that. I hope it's not so hard for you. I know Bianca mentioned that she's not looking forward to it. It used to affect me terribly. I hate it. I fucking hate the winter, and I hate the cold, man. I'd rather die than go back. I really would. It's just that I couldn't do it. I'd be dead there anyway, I know that. Well, unless I went back after it. Lots more dietism, a lot healthier, you know, and then nothing's a problem, right? But you just do it. But anyway. Might do another one tomorrow. Nothing fucking else to do except Spanish and eat food and boil shit food. See you later, guys.